When I made the decision to enter seminary, to study for the Unitarian Universalist ministry, my parents were a little surprised at first. Why they were surprised, I'm not so sure. After all, they always made me pray grace at special occasions like Thanksgiving and Christmas. You see, we were not a particularly religious family. Certainly, issues of social justice and compassion and service to humanity and ultimate questions were important in my household. We just weren't really religious folks. But at the Thanksgiving dinner table, grace seemed somehow necessary, and I seemed just the right person for the job. I remember being very young and bowing my head and praying to God in gratitude for all we are given, especially pumpkin pie. I remember being in high school, experimenting with Christian denominations and ending my prayers in the name of Jesus Christ. I remember when I found Unitarian Universalism and began addressing my prayers to the God of many names whose mystery is beyond all our naming. Through all these explorations of Thanksgiving grace, my family always assumed I would be the one to say the prayer. So why they were surprised when I decided to go into the ministry, I am not certain. Thanksgiving, for many people in our country, is the time when we feel the need to express our thanks for all the blessings in our lives. Even people who never pray find themselves praying in gratitude and sometimes in need. Unitarian Universalists tend to be among the crowd of folks who are stumped by the purpose, function, or process of prayer. Despite my years of Thanksgiving grace, I will admit that I was among that crowd. Like Liz, I was never a prayer expert. And then, a few summers ago, I began my clinical pastoral education internship as a student chaplain at a hospital in Dallas. Prayer was my job. To be a chaplain uncomfortable with prayer is like being a jockey uncomfortable with horses. The hospital that I worked at was full of mostly Catholic or Baptist patients, most of whom spoke Spanish. Now, my Spanish is good, but it's not great. And one of my first goals of the summer was to memorize the Lord's Prayer in Spanish. I can still remember the first line. Nuestro Padre que estás en el cielo, santificado es tu reino. Now, this prayer was pretty handy in a pinch, but it was not authentic to my own theology, and I felt like a fake. Sick people can see right through inauthenticity, and it felt like bad pastoral care to simply be reciting a prayer to a padre that I don't really believe in. Even if I can grant that padre is just another name for the ultimate, the spirit of life, whatever you may call it, I do not personally believe it to live in el cielo, or the sky, or heaven. No, the Lord's Prayer was all wrong for my style of chaplaincy, and it was pretty obvious. My supervisor at the hospital encouraged me to pray from my heart, just to help people express their needs out loud, to articulate their deep fears or concerns or hopes. So I began to be more comfortable with that, even in my limited Spanish, and to speak more eloquently the prayers for healing that were desperately needed. But I still wasn't sure what I was doing, other than summarizing their needs. And shouldn't a prayer be bigger than that? The greatest challenge, the one that I think highlighted the real issue of prayer for me, was when my unit supervisor informed me that every day I was to go around to each of the babies in the neonatal intensive care unit to pray for them. I did not need to pray out loud, but simply say a short, silent blessing over each individual baby in the 80 isolate unit. What? It was one thing to help people articulate their deep needs and fears for their own sake, but to stand there silently and awkwardly gawking in front of these infants who had no idea I was there for 80 babies? It felt like an awful waste of time for me. And over an hour and a half to do the baby prayers every day. It was a total waste of time in my mind. But see, for my unit supervisor, who was a devout Southern Baptist, he believed the role of prayer was direct. Just as the doctor was healing the baby's body, he was connecting that child to God and aiding in their healing. I did not hold such a belief, and thus I could not wrap my mind or my heart around using up such valuable time when I could be comforting a parent or a dying patient or a sick child. Someone who, in other words, knew I was there. The more I tried to do the prayers the way I believed I was supposed to, the more frustrated I became. In order to be recognized as someone saying a prayer and not some weird voyeur, I started using the sign of the cross before my prayers. This was my, hey look, I'm a chaplain and I'm praying here, kind of a move. But I was trying to force a round peg into a very square hole by using symbolism that was not just different from my theology, but starkly opposed to it. The cross, for me, is not the saving message of Christianity. It's a symbol of torture. The saving message of Christianity, like the message of many other religions, is of new life and of hope and of strength in the face of pain and death. For me, the cross wasn't the best symbol that I could invoke, but it at least told other people who happened to be watching what the heck I was doing, standing in silence looking at these babies. As the weeks had been passing, I had been getting better and better at translation, from Spanish to English and English to Spanish, and more often than not, Catholic or Baptist to Unitarian Universalist, and back. So when I touched my fingertips to my forehead, a translation occurred in my mind. The words from my welcoming ceremony came to me. My first minister was the Reverend Laurel Hallman at the First Unitarian Church of Dallas, and she blessed me with a rose the day that I became a Unitarian Universalist. As she touched my forehead that day several years ago, she had challenged me to let my mind seek truth. Then, standing in that hospital ward, as my hand fell to my heart, her words continued in my mind. May your heart know love. Her final words had been directed at my hands. And may your hands do good work all the days of your life. This cruciform motion that I had been doing was reminiscent of, though certainly not identical to, the blessing that I had been given as a neophyte Unitarian Universalist. The translation from a prayer that I was mimicking to one that was authentic to my beliefs had opened my heart wide. May your mind seek truth, may your heart know love, and may your hands do good work all the days of your life. So I was armed now with a new viewpoint on prayer and a new strategy for blessing those intensive care babies, and so I charged ahead with my mission. As my hand touched my head and then my heart, I would breathe deeply, gathering all the healing strength of the universe into my fingertips as strongly as I was able, along with the truth and strength of my mind and the love of my own heart. And as my fingers left my chest and were placed squarely on the infant's isolette, I would breathe out, slowly, deeply, with focus. All that energy that I had gathered from around me and within me would flow through my fingertips toward the tiny baby struggling for life.